The Grand Illusion, a bedtime story for grown-ups. In the heart of a bustling metropolis, where the cacophony of car horns and the relentless chatter of millions of souls merged into a constant, droning hum, there lived a man named Ethan. He was, by all conventional measures, successful, a high-flying executive in a Fortune 500 company, with a corner office that offered a panoramic view of the city he had conquered. Yet, as he stood at his window on this particular evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon and paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, he felt an inexplicable emptiness gnawing at his core. Ethan's life had been a carefully orchestrated symphony of achievements. From his early years as a prodigy in school to his meteoric rise through the corporate ranks, he had always known exactly what he wanted and how to get it. He had crafted his persona with meticulous precision: the sharp suits, the confident smile, the firm handshake that communicated authority and trustworthiness in equal measure. He was the very embodiment of success in the modern world. But lately, a question had begun to haunt him, creeping into his thoughts during rare moments of quiet. Is this all there is? The question was a persistent itch, one that he couldn't quite scratch, no matter how hard he tried to dismiss it with logic and reason. As the last rays of sunlight faded and the city began to sparkle with artificial illumination, Ethan decided to break from his usual routine. Instead of working late into the night, he packed up his briefcase and headed out of the office. The security guard at the lobby desk gave him a surprised nod as he passed. It was rare to see Mr. Reynolds leaving before midnight. The streets were still alive with energy, people rushing to and fro, lost in their own worlds of urgency and importance. Ethan found himself walking aimlessly, allowing his feet to carry him wherever they wished. He passed glittering storefronts displaying the latest fashions and gadgets, restaurants filled with laughing patrons, and bars where the worries of the day were being steadily drowned in amber liquid. Without realizing it, Ethan had wandered into a part of the city he'd never visited before. The streets here were narrower, the buildings older and more eclectic. The air was thick with the scent of incense and exotic spices. He felt as if he had stepped through a portal into another world, one that existed parallel to the sleek, modern city he knew. His attention was drawn to a small bookshop wedged between a fortune teller's parlor and a vintage clothing store. The sign above the door read Akasha's Attic in faded gold lettering. Something about the place called to him, and before he knew it, he was pushing open the creaky wooden door and stepping inside. The interior of the shop was dimly lit and cluttered, with books stacked haphazardly on every available surface. The air was heavy with the musty scent of old paper and leather bindings. As Ethan's eyes adjusted to the gloom, he noticed an elderly woman seated behind a small desk, her silver hair piled atop her head in an intricate bun. She looked up at him with eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of ages. "Welcome, seeker," she said, her voice surprisingly strong and clear for someone of her apparent age. "What brings you to my humble shop?" Ethan was taken aback by her greeting. I'm not sure," he stammered, feeling suddenly out of his depth. "I was just walking, and somehow ended up here." The old woman smiled knowingly. But there are no accidents in this universe, my dear. You are here because you are meant to be here. Now, tell me, what troubles your soul?" Under normal circumstances, Ethan would have scoffed at such mystical talk. He was a man of facts and figures, of spreadsheets and profit margins. But something about this place, about this woman, made him pause. He found himself speaking before he could stop himself. "I feel lost," he admitted, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "I've achieved everything I thought I wanted, but it feels empty somehow." The woman nodded sagely. "You have built a magnificent castle, but it stands on a foundation of sand. You seek something more, something real and lasting. Am I correct?" Ethan nodded, unable to speak. How could this stranger see so clearly what he himself had been unable to articulate? The old woman rose from her chair with surprising grace and disappeared into the depths of the shop. When she returned, she was carrying a small, leather-bound book. "This," she said, holding it out to him, "is what you need." Ethan took the book, running his fingers over the worn cover. There was no title, no author's name, just an intricate symbol embossed in gold, a tree with roots that stretched down into a reflection of its branches, forming a perfect circle. "What is it?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. "It is a map," the woman replied cryptically. "A map to the truth that lies beyond the grand illusion." Ethan opened his mouth to ask more questions, but the woman held up a hand to silence him. "Read it," she said simply. "When you are ready to begin your journey, you will find your way back here." With that, she gently ushered him out of the shop. As the door closed behind him, Ethan stood on the sidewalk, blinking in confusion. He looked down at the book in his hands, then back up at the shop, only to find that it had vanished. Where Akasha's attic had stood moments before, there was now only a blank brick wall. Clutching the book to his chest, Ethan made his way back to his penthouse apartment. The familiar surroundings of his home, all chrome and glass and modern art, suddenly felt alien and cold. He poured himself a glass of expensive scotch and settled into his leather armchair, the mysterious book resting on his lap. For a long moment, he simply stared at it, part of him afraid to open it, to take that first step into the unknown. But the emptiness inside him, the longing for something more, finally overcame his hesitation. With a deep breath, he opened the book and began to read. In the beginning, the first page read, "There was no beginning, and there will be no end. All that is, all that was, and all that will be exists in this eternal moment. The universe is not a thing, but a happening, a grand cosmic dance in which you, dear reader, are both the dancer and the dance itself." As Ethan read on, he felt something shift within him. The words on the page seemed to come alive, weaving themselves into the fabric of his consciousness. He read about the nature of reality, about the interconnectedness of all things, about the illusory nature of the separate self. The book spoke of the grand illusion, the belief in separation, in the idea of an individual self struggling against a hostile universe. It described how this illusion was the root of all suffering, all fear, all sense of lack and limitation. But it also offered a way out, a path to seeing through the illusion and recognizing the underlying unity of all existence. As the night wore on, Ethan lost all sense of time. He was vaguely aware of the sky outside his window changing from black to indigo to the soft pink of dawn, but he couldn't tear himself away from the book. It was as if every word was a key, unlocking doors in his mind that he never knew existed. When he finally looked up from the last page, the sun was high in the sky. Ethan felt simultaneously exhausted and more awake than he had ever been in his life. The world around him seemed different somehow, more vivid, more alive. He could hear the hum of the city outside his window, but it no longer sounded like noise. Instead, it was a symphony, a harmonious blend of countless lives all playing their unique parts in the cosmic orchestra. Ethan rose from his chair, his legs stiff from sitting for so long. He walked to the window and looked out at the city sprawled before him. The skyscrapers that had once represented his ambitions now seemed like toys, elaborate props in a grand play. He saw people on the streets below, rushing about their days, and felt a surge of compassion for them, for himself, for all beings caught in the web of illusion. He knew, with a certainty that went beyond mere intellectual understanding, that his life would never be the same. The path ahead was unclear, but for the first time in as long as he could remember, that uncertainty didn't frighten him. Instead, it filled him with a sense of excitement and wonder. Ethan picked up his phone and, without hesitation, called his assistant. "Cancel all my appointments for the next week," he said. "Something's come up." As he set the phone down, his gaze fell on the mysterious book. He had a feeling his journey was just beginning, and he couldn't wait to see where it would lead. The next morning, Ethan awoke to the unfamiliar sound of birds chirping outside his window. For a moment, he lay in bed, disoriented, wondering why he wasn't already at the office. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back to him: the mysterious bookshop, the enigmatic old woman, and the book that had turned his world upside down. He sat up, half expecting to find that it had all been a dream. But there, on his nightstand, lay the leather-bound volume, its presence a tangible reminder that something extraordinary had indeed occurred. As he went through his morning routine, Ethan found himself viewing every action through a new lens. The simple act of brushing his teeth became a meditation on impermanence, the constant flow of water, the gradual wearing away of enamel, the cyclical nature of decay and renewal. He looked at his reflection in the mirror and saw not just Ethan Reynolds, successful executive, but a temporary configuration of atoms, a brief eddy in the endless river of existence. These thoughts, which would have seemed nonsensical to him just a day ago, now felt profoundly true. Yet he also recognized that this intellectual understanding was just the beginning. The book had spoken of a deeper realization, a direct experience of the unity it described. Ethan felt a burning desire to pursue this understanding, to see how deep the rabbit hole went. But where to start? His usual methods of tackling a problem, making lists, setting goals, crafting strategies, seemed woefully inadequate for this new quest. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Ethan felt truly out of his depth, as if in answer to his unspoken question. His eyes fell on a sentence from the book, which he had copied onto a sticky note and placed on his refrigerator. The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. Ethan smiled, recognizing the gentle nudge of intuition. He didn't need to plan this journey. He simply needed to begin it. With a sense of excitement he hadn't felt since childhood, Ethan left his apartment and stepped out into the bustling city streets. Everything looked different now. The towering skyscrapers, once symbols of man's dominion over nature, now seemed to him like grand stone trees, their roots buried deep in the earth, their spires reaching for the sky. He wandered without destination, allowing his feet to carry him where they would. He found himself in a small park, an oasis of green amidst the concrete jungle. An old man was practicing Tai Chi, his slow, fluid movements entrancing. Without thinking, Ethan joined in, mimicking the man's motions. He felt foolish at first, his body stiff and uncooperative, but gradually he began to relax into the flow of the movement. As he moved, Ethan's mind quieted. The constant chatter of thoughts, worries about work, plans for the future, regrets about the past, began to fade away. For a few precious moments, he existed solely in the present, aware only of the sensation of his body moving through space, the feel of the breeze on his skin, the sound of leaves rustling overhead. When the old man finished his routine, Ethan bowed to him in gratitude. The man returned the bow with a knowing smile, as if recognizing a fellow traveler on the path. Invigorated by the experience, Ethan continued his wanderings. He found himself drawn to places he had never noticed before: a small Zen garden tucked away behind an office building, a tiny bookshop specializing in Eastern philosophy, a community center offering meditation classes. As the day wore on, Ethan began to feel a subtle shift in his perception. The boundaries between himself and the world around him seemed to blur. He felt a deep connection to everything he encountered: the trees, the buildings, the people rushing by. It was as if he could sense the underlying current of life that flowed through all things. Yet even as he reveled in these new experiences, a part of him couldn't help but analyze and question. Was this real, or was he simply caught up in some sort of psychological phenomenon? Was he discovering a profound truth about the nature of reality, or merely indulging in an elaborate form of self-delusion? As if in response to his doubts, Ethan's attention was drawn to a street performer standing on a corner. The man was juggling, but in a way Ethan had never seen before. Instead of trying to keep the balls in the air, the juggler seemed to be allowing them to fall, his hands moving in a graceful dance that happened to intersect with the ball's trajectories. It was mesmerizing to watch, a perfect balance of control and surrender. Ethan watched, transfixed, as the juggler's performance came to an end. The man caught each ball with a flourish, then bowed to his small audience. As the crowd dispersed, Ethan approached him. "That was incredible," he said. "I've never seen juggling like that before." The juggler smiled. "Ah, but you see, my friend, I am not really juggling at all. I am simply playing with gravity." Ethan blinked, struck by the profound simplicity of the statement. "What do you mean?" "Most jugglers fight against gravity," the man explained. "They try to keep the balls in the air, to impose their will upon the natural order. But this is a losing battle. Gravity always wins in the end." He chuckled, a warm, infectious sound. "So instead, I work with gravity. I embrace it, dance with it. I don't try to keep the balls from falling. I simply guide their descent and ascent." As Ethan pondered these words, the juggler fixed him with a penetrating gaze. "Tell me, my friend, what are you juggling in your life? What balls are you desperately trying to keep in the air?" The question hit Ethan like a physical blow. He thought of his career, his relationships, his carefully constructed image, all the aspects of his life that he had been striving so hard to control and perfect. How exhausting it had been, constantly fighting against the natural flow of things, trying to impose his will upon an indifferent universe. I'm not sure anymore," Ethan admitted. The juggler nodded sagely. "That is a good place to start. Uncertainty is the fertile ground from which true wisdom grows." He placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Remember, my friend, life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. Don't try to juggle it, dance with it instead." With that, the juggler gathered his things and melted into the crowd, leaving Ethan standing on the corner, his mind reeling. He felt as if he had received a profound teaching, though he wasn't quite sure he fully understood it yet. As the sun began to set, Ethan made his way back to his apartment. His head was spinning with all that he had experienced and learned. He felt simultaneously exhilarated and overwhelmed, like a man standing on the shore of a vast ocean, marveling at its beauty while also feeling intimidated by its immensity. Back in his apartment, Ethan picked up the mysterious book again, running his fingers over its worn cover. He opened it randomly, his eyes falling on a passage. "The universe is a game of hide and seek. The absolute hides from itself by becoming all the sentient beings of the universe, but eventually awakens to itself through those same beings. In forgetting its true nature, it creates the grand illusion of separation, and in remembering, it experiences the joy of reunion." Ethan sat with these words, letting them sink in. He thought about his life up to this point, the constant striving, the endless pursuit of success and security. He had been caught up in the game without even realizing it was a game. But now, it was as if someone had whispered the cosmic punchline in his ear, and he could feel the laughter bubbling up inside him. As night fell over the city, Ethan stood at his window, looking out at the twinkling lights. Each point of brightness represented a life, a consciousness, a unique expression of the universe experiencing itself. He felt a profound sense of connection to it all, along with a burning curiosity to explore further, to dive deeper into this new understanding. He knew that his journey was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, moments of doubt and confusion. The habits and beliefs of a lifetime wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time in as long as he could remember, Ethan felt truly alive, truly awake. As he prepared for bed, Ethan smiled to himself. Tomorrow was a new day, full of infinite possibilities. He couldn't wait to see where this grand cosmic dance would lead him next. In the quiet of the night, As the city's rhythm slowed to a gentle murmur, Ethan drifted off to sleep. His dreams were vivid and strange, filled with swirling patterns and fractal forms, as if his unconscious mind was trying to communicate truths that his waking mind couldn't yet grasp. In one particularly vivid dream, Ethan found himself standing on a vast plain under a star-filled sky. Before him stood an enormous tree, its branches reaching up to the heavens, its roots delving deep into the earth. As he watched, the tree began to glow from within, pulsing with a soft, warm light. A voice, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere, spoke to him. "This is the tree of life, the axis mundi, the connection between all realms of existence. Its roots are your roots, its branches your branches. You are not separate from it, you are it." As the words echoed around him, Ethan felt himself dissolving, merging with the tree, with the earth beneath his feet, with the stars overhead. For a timeless moment, he experienced a profound sense of unity with all of existence. Then, gently, he felt himself being drawn back, coalescing once more into the form of Ethan. But something had changed. He could still feel the connection, the underlying unity, even as he experienced himself as an individual once more. As he slowly rose to wakefulness, the dream lingered with him, its imagery and emotions more vivid than any dream he could remember. He lay in bed for a while, allowing the experience to settle into his being, intuiting that it held a significance beyond mere nocturnal fancy. Finally, Ethan rose and went to the window, drawing back the curtains to greet the new day. The city was coming to life, the first rays of sunlight glinting off windows and casting long shadows across the streets. He watched a flock of pigeons take flight, their movements perfectly synchronized, and smiled at this small reminder of the unity underlying all things. As he prepared for the day ahead, Ethan felt a sense of anticipation. He knew that his outer life might look much the same as it had before. He still had responsibilities, appointments, a role to play in the world. But inwardly, everything had shifted. He was embarking on a new phase of his journey, one that promised to be both challenging and profoundly rewarding. With a deep breath, Ethan stepped out of his apartment and into the flow of the city, ready to dance with whatever the day might bring. As Ethan stepped out into the bustling streets of the city, he felt as if he were seeing everything for the first time. The mundane details of urban life that he had long since learned to tune out now seemed charged with significance and beauty. The intricate dance of pedestrians navigating the crowded sidewalks, the rhythmic stop and go of traffic, the pigeons pecking at crumbs between hurried feet, all of it struck him as a magnificent, spontaneous choreography. He made his way to his office building, nodding at the security guard as he entered the lobby. The guard, used to seeing Ethan rush by with barely a glance, did a double take at the warmth in his eyes and the easy smile on his face. As the elevator carried him up to the executive floor, Ethan pondered how he would navigate his professional life with this new perspective. The cutthroat world of high finance suddenly seemed like an elaborate game, one he had been playing with deadly seriousness for far too long. His assistant, Sarah, greeted him with barely concealed surprise as he walked into the office. "Mr. Reynolds, I wasn't expecting you. Your calendar shows you're out for the week." Ethan smiled. "I know, Sarah. I'm not here to work. I just needed to take care of something. And please call me Ethan." Sarah blinked, clearly thrown off balance by this new version of her usually brusque and formal boss. "Of course, Ethan. Is there anything I can help you with?" "Actually, yes," Ethan replied. "Could you gather the team in the conference room in about an hour? I have an announcement to make." As Sarah hurried off to make the arrangements, Ethan settled into his office. He looked around at the trappings of his success, the expensive art on the walls, the awards and accolades displayed on shelves, the view of the city from his floor-to-ceiling windows. It all seemed somehow less substantial now, like props on a stage set. He opened his briefcase and took out the mysterious book, running his fingers over its worn cover. The symbol of the tree with its mirrored roots and branches seemed to shimmer slightly, as if alive under his touch. Ethan opened the book randomly, his eyes falling on a passage. The only way to make sense out of change is to plunge into it, move with it, and join the dance. Ethan smiled, recognizing the gentle nudge of intuition. He knew what he had to do. An hour later, Ethan stood before his team in the conference room. These were people he had worked with for years, but as he looked at their faces, some curious, some apprehensive, he realized how little he really knew them. He had always kept his professional relationships at arm's length, seeing his employees more as resources to be managed than as fellow human beings on their own complex journeys through life. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," he began. "I know many of you are wondering why I've gathered you here today, especially since I was supposed to be out of the office this week." He paused, taking a deep breath. "The truth is, I've experienced something of a personal revelation over the past couple of days. It's led me to reevaluate a lot of things in my life, including my role here at the company." A murmur went through the room. Ethan could see the worry in some eyes. Restructuring and layoffs were always a concern in their industry. "Don't worry," he said, holding up a reassuring hand. "Your jobs are safe. In fact, if anything, I'm hoping to make them better, more fulfilling. You see, I've realized that in our relentless pursuit of profit and growth, we've lost sight of something important, our humanity." He went on to outline a new vision for the company, one that prioritized not just financial success, but also the well-being of employees, ethical business practices, and positive contributions to society. He spoke of implementing meditation and mindfulness programs, of encouraging work-life balance, of redirecting a significant portion of profits to charitable causes. As he spoke, Ethan could see the expressions in the room changing. Skepticism gave way to interest, and in some faces, he saw a spark of genuine excitement. By the time he finished, there was a palpable energy in the room, a sense of possibility that hadn't been there before. "I know this is a lot to take in," Ethan concluded, "and I know it won't be an easy transition, but I believe that by aligning our work with a higher purpose, by recognizing our interconnectedness with each other and with the world at large, we can create something truly extraordinary." "Who's with me?" The response was not immediate. People looked at each other, unsure how to react to this unprecedented display of vulnerability and idealism from their usually hard-nosed CEO. But then, slowly, one person began to clap. Others joined in, and soon the room was filled with applause and murmurs of approval. As the meeting broke up and people filed out of the room, many stopped to shake Ethan's hand or pat him on the back. He could see questions in their eyes, but also a newfound respect and connection. Sarah, his assistant, was the last to leave. She lingered by the door, clearly wanting to say something. "Ethan," she said, his first name still sounding strange on her lips, "I just wanted to say, thank you. I've worked here for 5 years, and this is the first time I've felt, well, seen, like I'm more than just a cog in the machine." Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest. "Thank you, Sarah, and I'm sorry it took me so long to realize it." As Sarah left, Ethan turned to the window, looking out at the city sprawled before him. He felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. He knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy. Changing the culture of a large corporation was no small task, and he was sure to face resistance from board members and shareholders who were more concerned with the bottom line than with spiritual awakening. But he also felt a deep sense of rightness, of alignment with something greater than himself. For the first time in his career, he felt that his work could be a genuine force for good in the world. As the day wore on, Ethan found himself navigating a series of challenging conversations. He spoke with board members, trying to convince them of the long-term benefits of his new vision. He fielded calls from concerned shareholders, assuring them that profitability and purpose could coexist. He even had a long chat with the company's legal team about the feasibility of some of his more radical ideas. Through it all, Ethan was surprised to find himself feeling energized rather than drained. It was as if, by aligning himself with a higher purpose, he had tapped into a wellspring of energy and inspiration. As evening fell, Ethan decided to take a walk to clear his head. He found himself drawn back to the park where he had practiced Tai Chi the day before. The old man was there again, moving through his slow, graceful forms. Without a word, Ethan joined him, mirroring his movements. This time, he found it easier to fall into the rhythm, to let go of his thoughts and simply be present in the movement. As they finished, the old man turned to Ethan with a smile. "You return," he said simply. Ethan nodded. "I felt drawn here." The old man's eyes twinkled with understanding. "The way calls to those who are ready to walk it." They sat together on a nearby bench, watching as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in vibrant hues. "I've started to see things differently," Ethan said, feeling a need to share his experiences with someone who might understand. "It's like the world hasn't changed, but my perception of it has. Everything seems more alive, more connected. But at the same time, I'm questioning everything I thought I knew. It's exhilarating and terrifying all at once." The old man nodded sagely. "You have taken the first step on a great journey. You have glimpsed the truth behind the grand illusion. But be warned, the ego does not relinquish its hold easily. There will be times when you fall back into old patterns, when you forget what you have learned. This is natural, part of the dance." "How do I stay on the path?" Ethan asked. "You don't," the old man replied with a chuckle. "The path is not something separate from you. You are the path. The question is not how to stay on it, but how to be it." Ethan pondered this, watching as a group of children played on the grass nearby, their laughter echoing through the evening air. "I've started to make changes in my life, in my work," Ethan said, trying to align it more with this new understanding. "But I'm afraid that I'm not up to the task, that I'll fail, that I'll let people down." The old man placed a gnarled hand on Ethan's shoulder. "My friend, the only true failure is the failure to grow, to evolve. You have already succeeded by taking this step. As for letting people down, remember, we are all on this journey together. Your awakening creates ripples that touch all those around you. Trust in that." As the darkness deepened and stars began to appear in the sky, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. The challenges ahead still loomed large, but they no longer seemed insurmountable. He understood now that the journey itself was the destination, that each step, each moment was complete in itself. He turned to thank the old man, only to find that he had vanished as silently as mist in the morning sun. Ethan smiled, wondering if the encounter had been real or some sort of vision. But in the end, he realized it didn't matter. The wisdom imparted was real, regardless of its source. As Ethan made his way home through the now quiet streets, he felt a deep sense of gratitude wash over him. Gratitude for the mysterious book that had started him on this journey, for the people he had encountered along the way, for the challenges that had pushed him to grow. But most of all, he felt grateful for the grand illusion itself, the cosmic game of hide and seek that allowed the infinite to experience itself as the finite, that created the possibility for awakening and the joy of remembering our true nature. As he drifted off to sleep that night, Ethan's last thought was not of profit margins or business strategies, but of the intricate, beautiful dance of existence in which he was both participant and observer. And in that thought, he found a peace more profound than any he had ever known. As the weeks passed, Ethan found himself navigating a complex dance between his newfound spiritual insights and the pragmatic demands of his corporate life. Each day brought fresh challenges and opportunities for growth, testing his commitment to this new way of being. The changes he had implemented in the company were beginning to take root, albeit not without resistance. Some employees embraced the new direction with enthusiasm, finding renewed purpose and energy in their work. Others were skeptical, viewing the meditation sessions and ethical business practices as new age fluff that would ultimately harm the bottom line. Ethan did his best to lead by example, maintaining his own daily practice of meditation and mindfulness. He found that the more he cultivated presence and awareness in his own life, the more effectively he could navigate the complex dynamics of the corporate world. One morning, as Ethan sat in his office preparing for a crucial board meeting, he felt a familiar surge of anxiety. The old patterns of stress and worry threatened to overwhelm him. Closing his eyes, he took a deep breath, remembering the words from the mysterious book, "You are the sky. Everything else, it's just the weather." With this reminder, Ethan felt his anxiety soften. He realized that he could observe these feelings without being consumed by them, just as the sky remains unchanged by passing clouds. The board meeting was tense, filled with pointed questions about the company's new direction. Some members expressed concern about the potential impact on profits, while others worried about alienating traditional investors. As the criticisms mounted, Ethan felt an old impulse rising within him, the desire to dominate, to force his will upon others. But instead of giving in to this impulse, he paused, took a deep breath, and really looked at the people around the table. He saw not adversaries to be defeated, but fellow human beings, each carrying their own fears, hopes, and struggles. With this shift in perspective, Ethan found himself responding not from a place of defensiveness or aggression, but from a place of genuine understanding and compassion. He acknowledged the validity of their concerns while gently reaffirming the long-term benefits of the new approach. "I understand your worries," he said, his voice calm and assured. "We're charting unknown territory here. But consider this: in a world facing unprecedented challenges, from climate change to social inequality, can we afford to continue with business as usual? By aligning our success with the greater good, we're not just securing our future profits, we're helping to create a world in which those profits will actually mean something." As he spoke, Ethan could see a shift in the room. The tension began to dissipate, replaced by a tentative openness. By the end of the meeting, while not everyone was fully convinced, there was a general agreement to give the new direction a fair chance. As the board members filed out, one of them, Janet, a longtime member known for her hard-nosed approach, lingered behind. "Ethan," she said, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "I have to admit, I was skeptical about all this change, but watching you today, well, I saw something different. A kind of, I don't know, presence? It was compelling." Ethan smiled warmly. "Thank you, Janet. I'm on a bit of a journey myself these days, still figuring it all out." Janet nodded thoughtfully. "Well, whatever you're doing, keep it up. And, is there room in that meditation class for one more?" As Janet left, Ethan felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. It was moments like these, small breakthroughs, tiny shifts in perception, that reassured him he was on the right path. That evening, feeling a need for guidance, Ethan found himself drawn back to the strange little bookshop where his journey had begun. As he pushed open the creaky door, the familiar scent of old books and incense enveloped him. The old woman was there, just as before, her silver hair gleaming in the soft lamplight. She looked up as he entered, a knowing smile on her face. "Welcome back, Seeker," she said. "I've been expecting you." Ethan settled into a worn armchair across from her. "I've been trying to implement what I've learned," he began. "Trying to bring more awareness, more compassion into my life and work, but it's challenging. Sometimes I feel like I'm making progress, and other times I feel completely lost." The old woman nodded sagely. "The path of awakening is not a straight line, my dear. It's more like a spiral. You may find yourself revisiting old patterns, old challenges, but each time you do so with a new level of awareness." She reached out and took his hand in her gnarled one. "Tell me, what troubles you most?" Ethan sighed. "I guess I'm afraid of losing myself. The more I open up to this new way of seeing things, the less solid my sense of self becomes. It's exhilarating, but also terrifying." The old woman's eyes twinkled. "Ah, yes, the dissolution of the ego. It's a necessary part of the journey, but it can be quite unsettling." She paused, reaching for a book on a nearby shelf. "Perhaps this will help." She opened the book and read aloud. "The separate self is revealed to be a fiction, a conceptual construct. But this doesn't mean that your individuality disappears. Rather, it's revealed to be a unique expression of the whole, like a wave on the ocean. The wave doesn't cease to exist when it realizes its water. It continues to play its part in the grand dance of the sea." Ethan let the words sink in, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. "So, I don't have to fight against my individuality?" "Not at all," the old woman replied. "In fact, the fullest expression of your unique self is part of the cosmic play. The key is to hold it lightly, to enjoy it without clinging to it." As the night deepened, Ethan and the old woman continued to talk, exploring the nuances of non-duality, the nature of consciousness, and the practical applications of these esoteric concepts in everyday life. When Ethan finally left the shop, his mind was buzzing with new insights. But more than the intellectual understanding, he felt a deep sense of peace and rightness. He was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he needed to do. As he drifted off to sleep that night, Ethan had a vivid dream. He saw himself as a vast, cosmic being, composed of swirling galaxies and shimmering stardust. But at the same time, he was every person in the city below, every animal, every plant, every particle of existence. He was both the grand cosmic dance and every individual dancer. In the dream, he laughed, a laugh of pure joy and wonder at the magnificent paradox of existence. And as the laugh echoed through the cosmos, Ethan awoke, the sound still resonating in his ears and the feeling of boundless love filling his heart. He lay there in the pre-dawn darkness, marveling at the dream and the emotions it had stirred. And as the first light of dawn began to paint the sky, Ethan rose, ready to meet another day in this grand, beautiful, endlessly mysterious dance of life. As the seasons turned and years passed, Ethan's journey of awakening continued to unfold in ever-deepening spirals. The initial excitement of his spiritual breakthrough had given way to a steady, quiet joy that infused every aspect of his life. The company he led had become a beacon of conscious capitalism, inspiring similar transformations in businesses around the world. But more than the external changes, it was the internal shift that continued to amaze Ethan. The boundaries between his meditation cushion and his boardroom, between his spiritual practice and his everyday life, had gradually dissolved. He found himself in a state of continuous meditation, of perpetual wonder at the miraculous play of existence. On the 10th anniversary of his fateful encounter with the mysterious bookshop, Ethan decided to take a sabbatical. He felt a calling to step back, to integrate all that he had learned and experienced over the past decade. His journey took him to the far corners of the world, to silent retreats in the misty mountains of Japan, to the bustling streets of India where sadhus and businessmen rubbed shoulders, to the vast, starry skies of the Sahara Desert. In each place, he found both teachers and students, each interaction a reminder of the intricate web of interconnectedness that bound all of life together. As his sabbatical neared its end, Ethan found himself drawn back to the city where his journey had begun. The urban landscape had changed over the years, new skyscrapers reaching towards the heavens, old neighborhoods transformed by the relentless march of progress. Yet beneath the surface changes, Ethan sensed the timeless rhythm of life that pulsed through the city's veins. Almost without conscious thought, his feet carried him to the street where he had first encountered Akasha's attic. As he rounded the corner, his heart skipped a beat. The little bookshop was still there, looking exactly as it had a decade ago, a haven of timelessness amidst the ever-changing cityscape. The bell above the door chimed softly as Ethan entered. The familiar scent of old books and incense enveloped him like a warm embrace. And there, behind the counter, sat the old woman, her silver hair gleaming in the soft lamplight, her eyes twinkling with ageless wisdom. "Welcome back, old friend," she said, her voice as strong and clear as he remembered. Or should I say, "Welcome home?" Ethan settled into the worn armchair across from her, a sense of completion washing over him. "It feels like home," he admitted, "though I'm not quite the same person who first stumbled in here a decade ago." The old woman smiled knowingly. "And yet, in the deepest sense, you are unchanged. The real you, the awareness behind all your experiences, that has always been here, always will be." Ethan nodded, feeling the truth of her words resonate within him. "I've learned so much," he said, "seen so much, and yet, I feel like I've only scratched the surface." "That's wisdom, my dear," the old woman chuckled. "The more we truly know, the more we realize how little we know. It's the cosmic joke. The more we wake up, the more we recognize that we've always been awake." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the soft ticking of an old clock marking the passage of time that somehow felt both real and illusory. Finally, Ethan spoke again. "I've been wondering, what now? I feel like I've come full circle, but also like I'm at the beginning of something new." The old woman's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Ah, but don't you see? It's always now, always the end, always the beginning. The question is, how fully can you show up for this eternal moment?" As if on cue, the bookshop door opened, and a young woman entered. She looked harried and stressed, her eyes darting nervously around the shop. With a jolt, Ethan recognized himself from a decade ago in her demeanor. The old woman gave Ethan a meaningful look. "I believe this seeker could use some guidance. Are you ready to play your part in the grand dance?" Understanding dawned on Ethan. With a smile, he rose from his chair and approached the young woman. "Welcome," he said warmly. "How can I help you on your journey?" As he began to talk with the newcomer, Ethan felt a profound sense of rightness wash over him. This was why he had been called back here, not to end his journey, but to help others begin theirs. The grand illusion continued its cosmic play, and he had a role to fulfill in its unfolding. Later that evening, as Ethan prepared to leave the bookshop, he turned to thank the old woman. But the space behind the counter was empty, and somehow he knew he wouldn't see her again, at least, not in this form. His hand brushed against something in his pocket. Puzzled, he pulled out the mysterious book that had started him on this journey so long ago. He could have sworn he'd left it at home. Opening it, he found a new inscription on the first page. "The game continues, the dance goes on. You have learned to play your part with grace. Now help others remember that they too are dancers in this cosmic ballet. For in the end, we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There is no other. There is only the grand illusion and the joy of seeing through it." Ethan closed the book, feeling its weight in his hands, the weight of wisdom, of responsibility, of infinite possibility. As he stepped out into the bustling street, he saw the world with fresh eyes once again. Every person he passed was a unique expression of the divine, a wave in the vast ocean of consciousness. Every moment was a miracle, an opportunity to awaken, to remember, to celebrate the sheer wonder of existence. The grand illusion continued its play, but now Ethan danced with it consciously, joyfully. He knew that there would still be challenges ahead, moments of forgetting, of getting caught up in the drama of everyday life. But he also knew that underlying all of it was a deep, unshakable peace. The peace that comes from recognizing one's true nature as both the ocean and the wave, the dancer and the dance. As night fell over the city, Ethan made his way home, each step a meditation, each breath a prayer of gratitude. The stars twinkled overhead, reminding him of the vast cosmic dance in which he played his part. And in his heart, he heard the echo of laughter, the laughter of the universe delighting in its own magnificent game of hide and seek. For Ethan had discovered the greatest truth of all, that life was not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. And in fully embracing that mystery, he had found the key to eternal joy. As he drifted off to sleep that night, Ethan's last thought was not of the past or the future, but of the eternal now. In that moment, he was complete, whole, at peace. And as consciousness merged with the vast ocean of being, Ethan smiled, knowing that the real adventure, the adventure of fully being alive, of dancing with the grand illusion, was only just beginning.